Greetings and welcome back. Becoming Undone is a podcast for those who dare bravely, risk mightily, and grow relentlessly. Join me, Toby Brooks, as I invite a new guest each week where we examine how high achievers can transform from falling apart to falling into place. This week, this one's been quite a while coming. Chris McCormick reached out to me through LinkedIn. A lot of parallel, we'll call it, concerns between athletic trainers and strength conditioning coaches, and particularly in Division I sports. Chris today is lead pastor at Reliant Church, but prior to that, kind of in another life, he was the director of Olympic sports at Florida Atlantic University, where he was a strength and conditioning coach with aspirations of maybe one day being an AD. So we'll get into that later. But Chris, thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know we've scheduled this one a couple of times and
Yeah.
some tech issues tonight, but this is our time. This was when we were supposed to have this conversation. So I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah.
Lots of times athletic trainers and strength and conditioning specialists have athletic histories of their own, and I assume that's you too. So I always start with a little bit of a softball. What did you want to be growing up and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I've changed my profession at least 3 times in my whole career. Initially, I wanted to be a pediatrician. When I was in high school, that was something that I aspired to do. I got into undergrad and went the whole pre-med route and was like, I don't know if this is truly for me. So one of my first passions was sport, playing football and baseball and swimming and different sports in high school. And so as I went down the route of teaching and looking into teaching specifically in high school and coaching, I fell in love with history, but also psychology, and that's where my bachelor's was actually in. So even before into my coaching career, I was working on my PhD in neuropsychology, got my master's, and I left that essentially track to go into coaching, primarily football, and then transitioned into strength and conditioning. So kind of big divergent across that growing up.
Yeah. So you ultimately find yourself working at a Division I university where you're a strength
Yeah,
and conditioning specialist.
yeah,
That is a job that if you haven't done it, it's kind of hard to really fully appreciate the grind and
yeah,
the hours, the low pay.
yeah,
Um, Before we get to that,
yeah.
who was Chris McCormick when he was just a strength coach chasing that profession? What did you love about that world?
Oh man. Um, I've been out of it for 4 years, so even looking back, I've had some recent conversations with colleagues of things we love and things we're like glad we're not. Um, who I was, I mean, I was the the go-getter, the um, go 1,000 miles an hour. I used to be made fun of by our ATs, the gym flooring you have with our athletic shoes. You hear me squeaking down the kind of the hallway because I was moving so fast to the next thing. And I was just all about what is the next little thing that would lead to that 1% that would lead to success for our student athletes. And every single thing that would be incorporated with high performance or any of that. I was enthralled with that. That was my goal. That's where you talk about athletic administration. What's the little things that we can do so we could see the numbers on the scoreboard change and see our athletes be successful? And that's, I mean, who I was, I think, when I was a coach more than anything.
Hmm. Well, I know that for people that haven't lived in that environment, that culture can be surprising to a lot of people. And I know it
Yeah,
varies from place to place. Even, I mean, in the same place, if you get a coaching
yeah,
change with the head football coach, the culture can
yeah,
change overnight.
yeah.
But for those that maybe aren't as familiar, what does that lifestyle demand of you? And what was it like when you found yourself kind of nostrils deep in a career as a strength and conditioning coach?
Yeah. The only thing I can maybe attribute to is military families understand. And it's unlike any job where there's so many imaginary expectations, I think, that we put on ourselves more than anybody, especially from a support staff perspective. You could easily take the blame, but you don't get the praise as much. And just the sheer hours. When I was at Gardner-Webb University, a private Christian school in North Carolina, I was the director of athletic performance. I trained football and basketball primarily. I traveled with both. So there was times where I would get home from a basketball game. We played Liberty 4 hours away. I'd get back to North Carolina, we'd get off the bus at 2 a.m. and we'd have football at 5:30 in the morning.
Mm.
And it was just like I'd take a nap, drink some coffee, go work out, and go right back in. And that was a constant, constant thing. And I think that's just if you don't love every single thing about it, you will get swallowed up. And
Yeah.
everybody talks about grinding, and even now in ministry, I'm like, sports is a different realm. And if you're not about that life, then you'll get chewed up and spit out. With that, I think I've heard you talking about a little bit. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I oftentimes reflect back to my time at Liberty, actually.
yeah,
And I shared with my wife at the time, I said, I want to work in the NFL or be at a Power Five, and the grind and the hours, it just is what it is. There's no way around that. And I
yeah,
realized that grind was pulling me away from my family. Well, the other side of that was we were also almost in poverty. I was the head football athletic trainer making $36,000 a year.
yeah,
And I just couldn't reconcile that anymore, that my family's losing my time and we're suffering financially.
yeah,
And at a place like Liberty, at a Gardner-Webb, where it's a
yeah,
Christian institution, lots of times it was the running joke, like, this is a ministry, so that means they're going to pay you about 20% less than the market rate or more.
yeah.
And,
Oh yeah,
it was
yeah,
kind of a perfect storm of guilt for me as the
yeah,
leader of my family, feeling like I was
yeah,
failing my athletes, I was failing my
yeah,
family, I wasn't the
yeah,
provider.
yeah,
When that starts to accumulate on your shoulders,
yeah,
what was your thought process at that point? I mean, for most people, they might look at a second career, but planting
yeah,
a church maybe isn't necessarily uh, the direction a lot of people go. Although,
yeah.
I mean, I would argue that your career as a strength conditioning coach probably prepped you well, because
Oh man.
anything else feels like a part-time job.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny you say that because even now looking back, being a pastor, having the title, um, the struggles with identity and stuff that coaches have, you just slap pastor on that. It's the same thing. I mean,
Mm.
it's at least in strength and conditioning, we can formulaically take sports science and get like A plus B equals C. In the spiritual realm, I can do all the right things, and the Lord decides to do something completely different with it. So, if I want to find identity in this, that's a terrible place to find it as much as coaching. But it is funny, like in Gardner-Webb, similar story of just, it's a blessing and it's a ministry. It was my dream job. I wanted to work at a Division I Christian school. And it really kind of turned into me, only almost the antithesis of everything that I wanted to be in coaching. And you begin to red tape and draw lines between people and animosity and all those things. So coaching is just a unique aspect to that too, because you get to do something you love. That a lot of people that maybe are ditch diggers that make a lot of money that actually hate their job. And you get to do something you love, you still get compensated for it very well. And I think that's just a huge piece where some people do make a lot of money, but you only can do so much and wear that badge of honor on your chest of like, I'm doing this for the kids. And it's like, well, yeah, but I also have kids at home and I have
Yeah.
a family that's growing, and my wife stayed home most of the time. So I have no idea how we even survived
Hmm.
in that. So our story is very similar to the styles, what essentially you've been saying. I don't know how we even made it with the salary we were even on with my wife staying home, but I think it goes to show just the badge of honor that we try to wear, especially as support staff. You see other people being compensated in a certain way, especially in a Christian context. If you talk about Liberty or Gardner-Webb, your mission field, your calling, but there is a point where it just becomes, um, it may not be sustainable. And I
Yeah.
think financially and also emotionally and socially and all of those things. And that is such a huge wrestle, especially as a young professional of when is enough and when do you move on. And I think some of the things that you've talked a
Yeah.
lot in your sphere.
Yeah. I know. Liberty Gardner Webb. I mean, you feel like you're right on the threshold of your dreams. And it's like, if I could just hold on just a little bit longer, if
Yeah,
my coach
yeah,
makes it big and takes me
yeah,
with him.
yeah,
But you never know. So it's like, and
yeah,
my wife and I have had this conversation. I assume you and yours have as well. Like,
yeah,
Do we have to endure this for 6 more months or 6 more years or 10 more years? Am I never
Yeah.
going to get there? And it's just so hard. I mean, if you're running a marathon and you know how many miles are ahead of you, you can pace yourself. But in this
Yeah.
decision, you just have no way of knowing how long
Yeah.
do I have to endure this?
Yeah.
And it's just so tough. At what point did the job stop being something you loved and
Yeah.
start becoming maybe something that you felt like was just too much?
Yeah, I mean, I think the time at Gardner-Webb was a huge piece of that. Like I said, I was traveling with basketball and football. I was taking on teams. We had 22 sports there. I'd have maybe a couple GAs, maybe an assistant. There was turnover there because of just factors and people getting better jobs. And if you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, so you can train one team, but you got to train all the other things that comes with it. I loved the managerial side of being a director and in helping coaches and seeing them grow. But there was also the aspect with football and basketball. I was around a lot of successful basketball teams, and I think that eventually kind of became my niche. But also for our family, it was just like, I can't do this travel. And that's where I began exploring other jobs. And that's where, when I transitioned to Florida Atlantic, I wasn't traveling. I was more on the Olympic side. There wasn't as much of the demand. And it really allowed me to kind of go back into that love of coaching. Plus, living on the beach is obviously an excellent, excellent benefit. Uh, but like I said, it was Gardner-Webb was like everything I ever wanted in a job. And it was like it wasn't what I wanted it to be. And it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to be. And that kind of gave me one of those moments of, well, then what is the next thing that I actually
Right.
want if I've gotten what I wanted from a job position? So that kind of set me reeling, and then going to FAU kind of changed a lot because that was around COVID and kind of all those things that factor
Yeah.
in. So
Yeah. Wow. Our stories have so many parallels. When I
yeah,
left Liberty, we went and spent part of a season in Fort Myers with an Arena 2 football team. And
yeah,
same thing, like mornings on the beach.
yeah,
Working arena ball was like the best job I've ever had, especially Arena
yeah,
2, because they all had day jobs.
yeah,
So
yeah,
while they were at work, the family and I could go be on the beach. But the problem is
yep,
you only get paid for 6 months out of the year. So that
yep,
wasn't sustainable either. Was there a moment when you realized like something has to change or this is
yeah,
going to break me? What happened?
yeah. Yeah. I think it was, early on, even at FAU, I had a great situation. I worked for the head coach, Dusty May, who's at Michigan. He hired me at FAU. You start meeting certain people where you talk about the coaches, you're like, this is the person. Like, this is the person that if there would be success, I would love to stay with and work with. But there was a lot of factors, especially with my own faith, that, were impacted of our family began to be involved with foster care and adoption. So we were having children come into our home. We were involved more with our church, and that balance of, even if I wasn't traveling and whatnot, there's still a demand with, essentially directing a department and all the sports and all the games and all of those things, that I was like, I just don't know if I can do both of these things at a high level. And having a young family, I was like, well, what's the give or take here? And some of those external factors really drove me eventually towards ministry where I'm at indirectly, I think. But it also kind of put me in a position too where the breaking part, I can talk more a little bit about this, like the undone part, um, eventually turned me into I think the best version of the coach I was, because it kind of just made me not care as much about the things that I thought were so important. And it gave me some freedom after I got past that point of like,
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore, which is really interesting now looking back of kind of that path leading into coaching and now into ministry.
hmm So you're a believer. We really didn't get into your testimony, but
Yeah.
you're working at a faith-based institution. You go
Yeah.
to a state school. At what point does ministry as a potential vocation start to come
Yeah.
into the equation? And
Yeah.
when did you really feel that call on your life? And
Yeah.
subsequently, when did you surrender to it?
Yeah, so it was right around the time we started foster care and adoption. So the school we were at, Gardner-Webb, the head basketball coach, and his wife were involved with foster care. And my wife was tremendously involved with it. I was traveling. I was always like, I don't have enough time, even though he was kind of doing it. They didn't have that excuse. Then we moved to South Florida. The church we were going to was like the hub for foster care and adoption in Palm Beach County. And so the more I was exposed to it, the more this became there wasn't an excuse anymore. I was like, this is what I think we're being called to. And my wife was specifically the one that was kind of championing that. So as I got more involved with some of those things outside of sport, that balance piece became okay. Then what is this actually going to look like for our future? We had 2 young kids. We were in the process of adopting a child out of foster care, from which we did adopt. And so even as I talked to more pastors that I had, I mean, I moved 17 times in my marriage because of coaching. We had different churches and things we went to. A lot of people were like, have you ever thought about ministry? And I'm like, well, I don't want to be a pastor. Like I just, I'm looking maybe for something else outside of strength and conditioning, if that was athletic administration or ministry. And so I began exploring FCA and kind of seeing like what that would look like. My wife and I are from Indiana, where we live right now. And I thought I had it lined up. I thought it was going to be FCA, start fundraising. And literally like I was March of 2020 going to tell our staff and everybody I'm leaving. And we were at the Conference USA tournament, and COVID shut everything down. So it essentially made me go home with my family for the first time, and was like, okay, I'm forced to sit here essentially and try to figure out what is the Lord maybe calling me to. And that's where the
Mhm.
idea of church planting and being able to talk to other people really became prevalent. And there was a slippage of time as we were home and then coming back to sport and all of those things. But it was around that time frame, which is a very unique time frame, as everyone remembers. But inevitably led to me leaving coaching in July of 2021,
Mm.
and essentially going into full-time ministry.
Yeah. I know I've heard this time and time again from students
Yeah,
who leave the profession of AT in particular.
yeah,
You've invested so much time and money
yeah,
getting
yeah,
degrees and
yeah,
certifications.
yeah,
And the idea of sunk cost is a real thing. Like, am I just going to abandon this? Am I going to just walk away when
yeah,
I may be on the doorstep of my dreams?
yeah,
But ultimately, you made that decision. You
yeah,
pivoted and moved in another direction professionally.
yeah, yeah.
Leaving a career that you're invested in for years isn't easy. What did it take emotionally and spiritually for you to walk away from that world?
Yeah, I think early on for me it was easy because there was such an excitement about it. I think this new venture of jumping out. I mean, so many coaching jobs and things. You don't know somebody, you may have a network, you are leaving a week later to go to the next job. We always had that element in our family of like life can change in a dime. We would jump out at an opportunity. Going into ministry was such a unique thing because we were moving home, but I still have no idea sometimes what I'm doing because I had over a decade of ventured training and expertise in all of those things. So early on, it was, I could wipe it clean, and you get into the seasons, you start seeing things. But really, it was probably about a year or two into ministry where everything kind of dies down. And then even, I mean, I left FAU, and FAU went to the Final Four, and it was like you
Yeah.
were part of that. So then you
Mhm.
see that and you're like, oh man, what could be? And then you get people calling about opportunities and jobs that are really good jobs that I had a couple opportunities. And it's like, Lord, is this actually what I'm even supposed to be doing? Like I have these skills. So it took a lot of, unwinding of then realizing how much my identity was actually wrapped up in being a coach. Even if I
Yeah.
talk to people about it and people that were like, wow, that's really cool that you used to do that, and people want to talk to me about it, and how easy that I see it as a pastor now, but just the term coach is
Yeah.
like people cling to that. It's cool to talk about. And I thought I had a lot better lock on it, and I did not. And even seeing now more because of the amount of guys I talk to in the
Yeah.
profession still that are struggling with that, even though they're still in it. It's a real thing. And I don't know how
Yeah.
much you've struggled with that in the role you're in now, when you could even look sometimes and be like, you'll go to a game or something, and you're like, this is awesome. And
Yeah.
then it's like you like snap out of it and you're like, well, no, that's not what I'm doing right now. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah. The FOMO is real. And, for me, game days were tough. But
yeah,
just the day in and day out, the relationships with the student
yeah,
athletes was just something
yes,
that was irreplaceable. And for me,
yeah,
I went more into a teaching role, and that became my relationships with my
yeah,
students, and pouring into them. And for you, it's parishioners and
yeah,
members of your church.
yeah,
One thing I always try to share with my students who are considering making a pivot out of, in particular, a lot of them in the college ranks are just wrung out. They are,
yeah,
they're poor and
yeah,
they're burned out and they're
yeah,
ready for something different.
yeah,
And I always try to reassure them that you're not abandoning a skill set. What you've learned in that setting actually applies in a whole heck of a lot of places, and it will make you a tremendous asset to a lot of organizations because you've got a work
yeah,
ethic that few people on earth actually
yeah,
possess.
yeah,
And learning to live on such a meager amount can mean, if you get a little bump in your salary, it's great. How did your
yeah.
experience as a strength conditioning coach shape the way that you now approach ministry and even leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. The amount of times you can ask my wife that I would sit at the end of the day and be like, why in the world would the Lord call me into this? Like into pastoring, into preaching, and all the intricacies of people knowing what full-time ministry is. I think it's been the last 6 months that I've begun to see more as I get to know people more, because there's the relational piece of even the title of pastor versus a coach. And I'm sure, like, if you went back in the athletic training room, it's like back of your hand, you just go right back into every single thing, how you talked and all those things that you did. But as a pastor, I've worked in the physical development side of things, physical preparation, and now I am in a spiritual preparation side of things. And I think from the elements of, depending on what theologically people believe, there's a quote that grace is not opposed to effort, it's opposed to earning. And there's
Mm,
effort required in the Christian life. And there's the
yeah.
disciplines and spiritual disciplines. And the more you get to know people and realize there is an opportunity, you cannot control the growth, but you can cultivate the environments to which you're in. And that's what I used to do physically. And I'm seeing that more as a pastor of helping other people grow and pushing them in different ways and seeing things in their life. And I mean, that's kind of what I'm called to do. Almost you almost separate it because it's a coach versus it's not the same thing. And it's like, but there is so much element in that, and I think
Yeah.
it's blending together more of my coach and my pastor roles coming together, and I feel more comfortable now because I don't feel as much of an imposter of like,
Mhm.
am I doing this right? And that's me coming out in my role now, and I think there's just a lot more authenticity because I have 10, 12 years of being like that and doing certain things that does transfer with people because
Yeah.
it's relationships. That's
Yeah.
truly what it is. And yeah, I mean, it's funny you asked that question because it's more clicked with me now over the past 6 months than probably the 4 years I've been in ministry. And it's like, this is almost my niche. Like, I think this is what I'm called to in this specific thing with ministry. And it's very helpful in church planning where you get certain kinds of people come to our church. So yeah, it's been very interesting over the past few months.
Yeah. That's great. I appreciate that insight. Again, we're talking with Chris McCormick. He's the lead pastor at Reliant Church and former strength conditioning coach in Division One. Are there specific lessons you learned in the weight room that show up in your preaching or your pastoral work now? I know we talked kind of generalities in leadership, but are there any
Yeah.
specific things that you carried right over?
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing I've been reminded of and I've learned lately over the past few months is, um, you can go into the Gospels and look at the parable of the sower, and you can invest and pour seed in certain places. But in the parable, there's only 1/4 of that soil produces fruit. You can put effort and put time and put all of these things into certain soils, or even you would say certain people. And the ones that really do want to grow. Those are the exciting ones. It's just like the athletes that are all in on nutrition and everything holistically. They're ready to go. That's really exciting. It's really hard with those that aren't about the work and all those different things. And I've seen that more from as a coach going into the church, where you sometimes just get a pipe dream that everybody wants to grow and everybody wants these things. But if you've ever been in a weight room or a church, you realize that is not the case, even though people say it. And I think that's been a huge thing for me is you got to spend time with the people that really do want the very things that they say they want. And you got to be careful with spending time and investing my time as someone who spent a lot of time in sport and doing a lot of different things. It is very similar in ministry where I can invest my time in a lot of things that it doesn't matter ultimately. I think that's been huge for me because again, that's a relational piece that I've taken from coaching, but now I see in ministry ever more um, because it's really hard and it's not. And I used to say all the time, it's not for everybody, and it's truly not like it. And um, yeah, I think that's a very good parallel I've seen from the sports side to ministry.
Yeah. One thing I've been trying to kind of catch up on, I mean, I'm not in an athletic training setting and I'm not working as a strength conditioning
Hmm.
coach, but I'm definitely interested in the sports science
Yeah,
and all the data, things that really didn't exist when I was working clinically, the catapult data and force
yeah,
plate data and,
yeah,
so many things that are measurable. And a
yeah,
lot of places are collecting data, but what are they doing with it? And I see that parallel in the work that I do today. If it matters, it needs to be measured, but measuring it isn't enough. We want to make data informed decisions.
yeah,
Have you seen that carry over into your work? You're not that far removed from the field. So data
yeah,
science was a pretty big thing a few years ago
yeah,
and
yeah,
continues to grow. Do you see that in your
yeah,
work today?
yeah. I mean, I think the question is what are we truly measuring with even in the context of spirituality in the church? Because in the church, we joke, we measure butts, budgets, and whatever the other B is. It's like, that's what we expect. And some of the other things are very hard quantitatively or qualitatively to actually measure. Even in the weight room, your vertical, your squat numbers, all of those things can go up and you still can be really terrible on the field and I could still get fired for it. Or I can have, we could tag team together a support staff and there's no non-contact injuries. And then at a drop of a hat, someone fires us because they just don't like us anymore. So you have all this data and it's like, but is the data actually informing some of the decisions to which you're going to make? And I think that's really hard from a discipleship standpoint too, because then it's like um, the measuring of growth is a lot easier in the weight room than it is in a spiritual realm. And
Hmm.
that takes more time. The hard thing with sport is if you don't get results, you're gone. Well, how do we measure that within a church setting too? Because you can't have them, like I said earlier, you can have all the numbers, but then nothing happens within the church and the Lord does not decide to do anything with what you
Right.
put
Yeah.
together in your perfect plan. So that for me and being an Excel like kind of person, it's like, well, I can have a sweet plan, but that doesn't mean it's actually going to work. So
Right.
I think data is helpful. The question is, are we even asking the right question?
Yeah. It's a
We can
great
collect a
question.
lot of data and not actually be solving the right problems. And I think that's inevitable in any profession, obviously, because then we can justify essentially by with metrics and things like that of why we're doing a good job
Right.
and not get any results.
Yeah. I know in working with athletes, the notion of high decibel motivation comes up, and not very pastoral to kick somebody in the pants when they're underperforming or not growing.
Yep.
But man,
Yep.
sometimes it sure would be nice.
Yeah, that's why I told people, I'm like, I don't know how much you trust me from the spiritual sense of leading you, but I can definitely physically and strength and conditioning in the sense lead you. I was like, but I can't put my certain hats on in certain environments. It's like I've shifted to the shepherd now. I can't be
Yeah,
as much as maybe would work in that other environment.
yeah. If there's a strength coach or an athletic trainer who's listening right
Yeah,
now who is feeling that same pressure and that burnout that
yeah,
you once felt, what would
yeah,
you want them to hear?
yeah. It's almost if I was talking to myself how many ever years ago. I mean, I think something I've thought about a lot lately, especially conversations with younger professionals, being a safer person, I guess, to talk to who's not in the field, is this idea that, you know, wherever you're at in your career, pressure in whatever it is, whatever you're putting on yourself, the surrounding profession is putting on you, your boss, whoever it is, pressure is going to essentially expose what's forming you.
Mm,
And once we figure that out, um, it might be a good thing or a bad thing. And I think that's where identity, I think this idea of who you are, and that's going to eventually lead to what you do. And what you do is eventually going to lead to your behavior and how you live. And if you can't pinpoint some of those things, you might be going down a road that you have no idea that you're actually going down. And if that's burnout, that's a fruit of probably bad roots. Fortunately, many times when you figure that out, it's too late because you've been putting it off. You haven't had time, all of those things. So, I mean, I think one of the biggest pieces is that you are not your job and you will be replaced in a heartbeat if you
mm,
think you're more important than you really are. So you need to take care of yourself and you need to have people around you who truly do have your best interests. And when you do have that,
yeah.
I think there's a lot more freedom and the burnout and all of those things won't be as prevalent. Um, because like I said, it's so easy looking back the pressures I put on myself that were not even real. And it's like
Hmm.
I was the one that put it on there because no one could put more pressure than me on myself. And I think that's a huge thing for people that they really need to evaluate.
Yeah. I think that's a great perspective. If you look back, do you think that God had to break you or break the life that you built in order to get obedience into this calling that you're carrying out today? Or was it really just preordained steps? How do you view the journey that you've
Yeah,
taken?
that's a really good question. Not speaking for God, I'll say that. I mean, ministry is the most sanctifying thing I've ever been in. I mean, it really has. I'm so grateful, regardless of success in ministry and church planning and all those things, that the Lord has put us in this because more than anybody, it's drawn me closer to Jesus. Like I can't say it any other way. Coaching did that, but I think more of a superficial way because there was still a lot of like, I want to be this thing and I could sugarcoat it into my identity. But I think some of it is, yeah, I think even now on this side of things, being out of coaching, I wanted to go in athletic administration because I wanted to help coaches. I really did. Um, and now that I'm on the outside of it, I feel like me going through some of these things, especially through ministry, I might actually be able to help coaches now,
Yeah.
and actually holistically help them and give them maybe more than what they need. I've always felt that, but I think the Lord has had to take me through some things. So then I actually prepared to do that very thing that I think I'm going to be devoting a lot more time to over the next few years. So yeah, I think it was very intentional. And also I'm a knucklehead and make dumb mistakes and do those things. But I think it was ordained in some way, the sovereignty to get me to this point because I do have a different perspective. And I've said if I went back into coaching, I would be a totally different coach, like
Hmm.
completely because of seeing and being on this side of things now.
Yeah. I've heard it said that if we've been through what we've been through and Division One athletics being the way that it is, you either emerge from that thinking about the next generation, well, I went through it, so you're going to have to. Or I think a more contemporary approach is I went through it, so let's make sure you don't have to. And I think with your
Yes.
perspective and lived experience through that,
Yeah.
and now
Definitely.
serving in a pastoral role, I really
Yeah.
could see how that's a perfect combination for
Yeah.
someone who's in the midst of their own purpose storm, trying to figure out what in the world they're here for.
Yeah.
If not this, then what? And I think that's something that haunted me for a lot of nights.
Yeah.
I knew I couldn't keep doing what I was doing, but I didn't know what else I could do. And I
Yeah.
think if there's any hope we could offer that next generation, it's that more than you think,
Yeah.
way more than you think.
Yeah. You said the work ethic thing. I'm like, I would hire somebody in a heartbeat who's been a coach or an athletic trainer. The amount of stuff that you, especially you guys have to do to hold together the relate. I mean, you are a jack of all trades, everything, all the time. And uh, I know the work ethic is bar none. I'm not going to worry about you being lazy. Because I know side by side what that life looks like. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got two left for you. And I asked
Yeah.
these of all my guests. If
Yeah.
we were to watch a montage of your life and we laid
Yeah.
some music underneath it, what song would you pick and why?
Man, that's a good question. A montage of my life. I'd be interested to hear some of the other podcast people what they've said. So mine would be there's a song by Hans Zimmer. He's the orchestra. He does all
Hmm.
like the Christopher Nolan movies. It'd be Time from
Oh, I
Inception.
love it.
Inception's my favorite movie.
Yes.
It's like the point where Leonardo DiCaprio wakes up and
Hmm.
that either on the airplane. Um, I've listened to that song many times. I don't know why. I listen to it when I study and do things, but it's such a I don't know. My journey somehow it interludes with that of like
Yeah.
our life and just how things have kind of played out. And I've never have guessed I'd be in the position I'm in. So I don't know. It somehow just reminds me of that. So I
Yeah.
think that would be the song.
Oh, I love it. I put all those together into a mixtape on Spotify, basically a virtual mixtape on
Yeah,
Spotify. I also
that's
put
awesome.
a video into the page
Yeah,
once we create the page for this episode.
yeah,
Last one.
yeah,
The title of the show is Becoming Undone. The idea that we go from unraveling and feeling like we're literally being torn apart to
yeah,
realizing that we've got a purpose left unfulfilled, that we're unfinished, that we're undone.
yeah.
What for Chris McCormick remains undone?
I think it's what we've talked about towards the end. I've done a lot of different cool things in my life. I've been called to different things. What I'm undone is the state of our profession, coaching. My wife and I both have a burden for coaching families, especially husbands and wives, that there has to be a better way. You can't wait for structures and people and organizations and um, alliances of things to fix it. It starts with you and just having mediums, um, retreats, more conferences about your family and outside of work than just inside of work and X's and O's and talking shop. There's so many things I think of when I was in coaching. If there was more resources and my ego probably wasn't in the way of like, I don't need this, it would have saved a lot of heartache. And I think
Mhm.
that's something moving forward. I hope my unique kind of skill will be able to help people with that. And more than anything, that there won't be as much burnout and people will truly enjoy what they're doing because and return to why they started doing it. And
Yeah.
I hope be a small sliver of impact in that in the future.
Yeah. And I have to be careful. I'm on LinkedIn and I've been pretty critical of the professional athletic training.
Yeah.
And then adjacently, I've got great friends in strength conditioning, media
Yeah.
relations, the
Yeah.
academic folks. If you're working in
Yeah.
college sport, you are worked to the bone and you're not making a lot unless you're at the peak of the organization.
Yeah.
My message isn't everyone get out and do something else. For some people, they can make changes and it's a sustainable life. So I think
Yeah.
what you're saying, there's definitely a need for that. Not everyone needs to make a hard pivot and become a pastor. For some people, they just need to be more intentional about serving in a way that's sustainable for their family and
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when I was at my worst, my student athletes were suffering. They weren't
Yeah.
getting the care that
Yeah.
I wanted to give them because my cup wasn't full.
Yeah.
And that's, I won't say it's dangerous. It's certainly suboptimal.
Yeah.
And if I can't pour all of myself into that relationship, then they're paying the price for that. And they
Yeah.
deserve better than
Yeah.
that.
And I think that's a huge. I've talked to several people who coach coaches from the like professional level and not even on the spiritual side. It's just I'm the guy that the head coach can talk to outside the organization. And we talk about buyouts and how the money and all these structures, and I'm like, we talk about insurance and liability within sports medicine and athletes and all those things. And I think it's the same way with coaches. Is what if you can save a coach from blowing up and having to fire somebody because you actually have help for them? And what does that look like? And having people even within the organization that is not just sports psychology, but there's people that coaches can relate to because they've been in their shoes. And I think
Uh-huh.
that's where more of the sages that are retiring, if it's someone like you or someone like me or someone like a head coach who was in it forever, are actually coming back to mentor and help. I think that would do tremendous amount of help that because I never had that when I was a coach. So I can
Same.
go to
Yeah.
people, but I think that is such a pivotal piece. And like you said, I was called to something. I did feel like I ran away from my because I loved my job. I just felt like this is what I had to do, and not everyone's going to do that. So
Mhm.
we need to support them while they're doing what they're called to do too.
Absolutely. Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining me tonight. I really do appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, and I'm thankful for your insights.
No, I appreciate it, Toby. Thank you.
All right, last little bit. I always stitch this in. If you could just introduce yourself and say, "And I am undone."
I'm Chris McCormick. I am undone.
That's tremendous. I'm going to stop it right there.